Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.
Now, very able to say Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times with us. Hey, Gerry.
Hey, how you doing, Joe?
Great. And Fiona Hayes, you are there, I presume?
I'm here, Joe.
Very good. So we have France Grand Slam winners. We have Ireland second in the championship. Triple Crown is a perfectly acceptable consolation prize. Irish under-20s Grand Slam champions at Musgrave Park yesterday. Italy with a win for the first time since 2015. 36 straight defeats. And then in Cardiff, of all places, they win the game in beautiful, dramatic fashion. Paolo Garbisi collapsing in a heap and Ange Capuozzo, I think, suddenly a star. So we'll get to all of that, not to mention Greg McWilliams talking to the media today ahead of the Women's Six Nations at the weekend. But let's start with Ireland 26, Scotland 5. Odd performance in some respects. Gerry, here we are after another bonus point win for Ireland, and we're thinking, could have been a bit better.
Undoubtedly, yeah. It wasn't anything like the best performance of the tournament that they were looking for. A lot of moves didn't quite come off. There were a lot of handling errors. That time, Johnny did the really clever inside wrap as a way for variation. I was surprised he didn't get the ball to James Lowe. Dan Sheehan's shoulder, it looked like that would have been a try. There are a few other examples. James Lowe, a fairly unsympathetic pass to Ty Byrne. Caelan Doris knock on, so on and so forth. And I think they resorted to the bludgeon and went back to the bludgeon that they've used so well in the past under Joe, and got 4 close range time and kind of overpowered Scotland in the end. Their defence was excellent. I almost had to check the scoreline at the end to make sure that Scotland really only scored 5 points, considering the line breaks they made and the chances they had, most obviously the one that Stuart Hogg blew, albeit it was a truly stupendous tackle by Hugo Keenan. But you always felt that they had France in their pocket, they had Scotland in their pockets, and they probably were going to get that bonus point, and at least it was a grand finale. It was a great finish. You know what I mean? To get that 4th try, to see all the players so happy. The crowd even got loud for once, even that last 10 minutes, the first time in 3 games, and started singing the Fields of Athenbryan. It was quite a great finish to it, at least. So they signed off on a good note and got their first trophy in home soil for 18 years. So, yeah, I agree with you. It was an inaccurate performance, not quite the performance they were looking for. And you had a 4th bonus point try win. So, 21-point haul. They've only betted that once in 6 years of the Six Nations. A lot of the metrics look very good. They've unearthed Dan Sheehan and Matt Hansen. So overall, it's been a very positive tournament and a positive way to sign it off.
No rugby slaw is complete at the moment without you having a little snipe at the Aviva atmosphere, by the way. Although I was thinking of you on during the game, especially in the first half, because it was so quiet. We were wondering, even in studio, did we have the wrong feed coming in, because there was just not a sound. And pre-match, it was a beautiful weekend. I mean, the weather's been so miserable for the last couple of months. It was a beautiful weather weekend in Dublin. Paddy's weekend, everybody's off for a couple of days, and evening-ish kickoff and nice atmosphere building. And first 10-15 minutes up until the first try, the Sheehan try, Scotland are doing very, very well, and the atmosphere just seems to get sucked out of the whole thing and never really recovered until maybe towards the end when they were pushing for that 4th try, which really didn't make any great difference anyway. So it was just a slightly odd occasion, Fiona, in that respect, an odd game. And I don't know, maybe to an extent, everybody knowing that France were probably going to win hung over the thing a little bit. So it wasn't ripe with tension.
No, it definitely wasn't ripe with tension. As Gerry was saying, the errors, I was looking at some stats. I think they'd turnovers conceded was about 15 or 16. So I think that was getting the crowd a little bit on edge. It was definitely a game that you felt Ireland were on top physically, defensively, really were good physically around the maul or picking goals was really, really strong. But that backline attack probably didn't kick in as well as we'd like to have had it. And I was saying to Gerry, a friend of mine was at the game and near the front, and she said the only time the crowd really got going in the first half was to wind up Finn Russell doing his warm up. He was getting good banter out of them.
Gerry, on the Irish attack, we had this extraordinary November performance, and then they picked up where they left off against Wales, and things really clicked. And I don't know if since then we've seen it click in attack for any great period of any game.
Well, it clicked in the second half in Paris pretty effectively, really. That always felt like a title decider before the game, and it felt immediately afterwards like it was the game of the tournament and a title decider. And so it's transpired, isn't it, with an 11-point gap between the top 2 and the rest. I thought there was some really good attack in that game. I think there have been patches of really good attack in the other games since.
Patches is maybe my point, though, because I appreciate they've scored more tries than any other team, Irish team in Six Nations history with 24. Yes. So, the metrics are phenomenal, and you'd almost forgive them anything, because when it clicks, it really clicks. But there was just something so sustained about the Welsh performance, maybe is the better way of putting it.
Yes, I would agree with you. That was the most sustained performance of the five, Joe, the first one. And I guess it's partly because they're playing at such a high tempo. They generated the quickest ruck ball of any team in the competition, and they're making more passes. They made over 1,000 passes in 5 games, way more than the others. Even France had the least passes and kicked the longest. So it's funny how the two teams are going about it quite differently. But when you do try to play that brand of rugby, mistakes are more likely to happen, aren't they? There's just such a higher tempo, and you've got to make decisions quicker and so forth, and the skills just have to be on point all the time. And I guess it's a good position to be in, to think that this is a team that we're all enjoying watching playing rugby. They're probably playing the most positive brand of rugby I've ever seen from an Irish team, and there's still so much room for improvement, having scored a record 24 tries in the tournament. So that's the other way of looking at it. I think the word from the camp, you talk to and listen to any of the players or coaches afterwards, are always saying that, look, we're not there yet. There's plenty more to come, and I think that's true.
Fiona, is that your read on it, that they're trying more, high risk, high reward type passes, and so they're handling errors? We're going to have to get used to 15, 20 turnovers in a game from an Irish side, but we can only crib so much if they're walking away with bonus point wins all the time, and they'll get better at it. Is that your read on where the attack is at the moment?
Yeah, and I think the coach and staff are probably happy where they're at. I obviously love the tempo they're playing, that 3-second ruck. They're moving the ball about. The forwards and backs are interlinking. So it's a high risk type of rugby. And I suppose we started with that Wales game, and the errors were probably smaller than they have been in other games. So we expected an Irish team to get better like that. We expected us to kick on, and maybe they didn't patches, as we say, but probably consistently it didn't happen. But I think it's really, really building. And I think the defence has been outstanding. So I think Irish people, we have a big expectation on them, because we know how good the squad is. We're seeing players come in, come out, and everyone is kind of stepping up to the mark. But I think if you just stand back and take an overall look at how they finished, obviously disappointed that there wasn't a Grand Slam, but that's not to say that couldn't happen next year. This French team coming to Ireland next year, and then you're going into World Cup after that. So I'm happy where they're at. I just think the speed of the game, they need to get that skill set probably up, and it's the more they train together, the more they're in camp, and they are gradually going to build those connections.
The general consensus, Gerry, I'm sure you're talking to people all the time, obviously over the last number of weeks, but the consensus seems to be that the public at large are willing to forgive this team a huge amount of mistakes, because they're really enjoying the ambition in the rugby, and they're seeing that it's building towards something that's potentially incredibly exciting. And the one thing you'd say about this team now is, however it goes in 15 months' time, for instance, or however it goes over the summer, they're going to have a crack at this, and they're going to try and fire a few shots, which, probably towards the end of the Joe Schmidt era wasn't happening enough, and therefore people are willing to make allowances for quote-unquote sloppiness. Again, I was even saying in studio, we may have to stop doing quote-unquote sloppy Irish play pieces, because there are going to be more turnovers, and it's almost a mindset shift for all of us.
Yeah, I think there's a large element of truth in that. It's a huge mindset shift, because it's a huge different way of them playing the game. Even if they did resort to old values, they went back to bludgeon some of their tries. But yeah, I think so. It requires so much fine tuning. This, like they kept telling us it was coming, and then it started to deliver at the end of last year's Six Nations, carried on through November, and now. And I think it's still good that there's more room for growth in this team, and I think they will get better, and hopefully those turnover counts and handling errors will be reduced, and they'll become even more accurate when they. But when you think about it, they scored 24 tries and made a hatload of handling errors. Okay, they're asking questions of the defence in a way that I don't think any other team in the Six Nations is doing. I mean, you could argue, say at the moment, that New Zealand, France, and Ireland are playing the best rugby in the world, and I know South Africa are number 1 in the world, and they're followed by the other 3, but they certainly seem to be playing the best rugby in Europe at the moment in terms of their attacking game. And you look, even when they do click and they get it right early on, like when you're tight forward and going up with the 3-man pod, and you can tip it in, tip it on, carry it, or pull it out the back. And we've got loads of forwards who can do this. It's the skill set across from 1 to 15. You've got forwards who can be playmakers, like in the middle of the pitch, like a centre. And then you've got backs who are very good at the breakdown and can chip in with that workload as well. And it's a very kind of total brand of rugby. It requires huge work rate off the ball. I think that's the key. And I don't see any other team playing with as much right off the ball and generating as many options in attack.
No.
So I think that's, like I keep saying, I think that's really encouraging. That the acid test will come, I presume, with the New Zealand tour. You know what I mean? When you think about the All Blacks, and they'd be thirsting for revenge after what happened in the Aviva Stadium last November. 3 tests at home against Ireland, and Ireland taking on 2 more matches against the Maoris, maybe twice, or the Maoris and the Super Rugby team, and taking over 40 players. Like, this is just an invaluable tour. They're going to learn so much from this about their depth chart and about other players, and it's going to teach them an awful lot. And you only improve by playing the best, and the best still are, to all intents and purposes, the All Blacks in their own country, in Eden Park Fortress, where they haven't lost in decades. So I think they'll benefit hugely from this tour. And then you've got the Six Nations next year, when you've got England and France coming at home, and that's worth targeting in itself. We've seen how France have targeted this Six Nations. Okay, they want to target this Six Nations because they wanted a title before they hosted their World Cup, and that's why last Saturday night was huge for them, because they coped to a degree with the pressure of expectations of delivering a title, effectively a knockout match in their own Stade de France in front of 80,000 very passionate fans, and with a lot of the country watching and in love with this French team again. So I think that they've been the prime beneficiaries maybe in that sense, but I do think there's a chance for Ireland, with France and England at home next year, to really go after a title as well.
Yeah. It's all very interesting at the moment. And there is something almost un-Irish about what this Irish rugby team are doing, Fiona. If you take sport here generally, be it GAA, be it the Irish football team, be it the rugby team over the last number of years, whatever it is in our culture and our makeup, we tend to prize hard work, honesty of effort, teamwork, all of these things, and efficiency over being free scoring and wasteful. And now suddenly we're a team that can be a touch wasteful or have these handling errors, but we're suddenly putting big scores on teams all the time now. And again, we're not used to it. It's not generally been the way Irish sport has went about its business on the international stage.
No, but how exciting is it to watch?
That's great.
I mean,
it's nice for a change, I think.
Oh, it's so good. It's, I've spent years watching Super Rugby, and I've watched the leagues over here, and I'd be just wondering, why can't Munster give that a go, or why can't we try this out? But I think there's like the style in which rugby's been played now and the speed at which it's going. I think Ireland have really adapted to that, and they found, we had Joe Schmidt, who was obviously an expert and was very detailed, especially around that breakdown area. But we see this Irish team trying things, and it's exciting. And as you said, Joe, the public in general aren't too mad about it. You obviously have your few on Twitter and whatever giving out about we'll be knocked out in a quarter final again, but I think it's building, and every game there's players that are standing up and stepping up to the mark, and I think that's what's really exciting about it, is that we're looking at different players in every game saying, geez, he had a great game, or he's come on loads. And especially with this Six Nations, I mean, Hugo Keenan is someone that has just absolutely been out of the blocks, not to mention Van der Fleer.
And we might well be still knocked out in the quarterfinal, but at least we're going to test defences and score some tries along the way and die with boots on kind of approach. Just on some of the players worth mentioning, Dan Sheehan, man of the match. I'm double checking his try record because it just seems too good to be true. I think he's up to 15. Gerry, reading your piece this morning, for Leinster and Ireland across 27 matches, so that's rather insane, and all the carries and tackles to boot, and he's so athletic. Fiona, in terms of the duel with Kelleher over the coming decade, I did, just talking to a few different people, get the sense that maybe if there is a quote-unquote weakness in Sheehan, it might be his scrummaging, that he's still quite high. He's a big man in the scrum. Have you seen anything there to be overly worried about, or is it early days yet?
Oh, it's early days yet. I mean, we're talking about Keller and Sheehan, and he's really after giving Andy Farrell food for thought. He's just come on the pitch so composed, that man of the match. I watched him up in the stands, and the work rate he has, absolutely immense. When he gathers pace, he's just a serious ball carrier. Look, the scrum obviously didn't go right against England, and that Wales match in particular, we're very proud of our scrum, and after Keller's injuries. But I think that was just across the park. I personally, even when I'm watching with Leinster, I don't see an issue with height. And the more games he gets, if he gets some game time over in New Zealand playing against that pack and that scrum house, he's constantly going to be working with it and working with those guys around him. So it's not even an issue to me. I think it's going to be an absolute crazy battle, and it's definitely one Leinster are going to have to look at as well. Who's going to be getting that starting spot?
Yeah, on the scrum, Gerry, this was a bit of a litmus test after Twickenham. Certainly it more than held its own for much of the game. When it was Kilcoyne, Herring and Beelum towards the end, there was a wobble. So I guess that comes back to your point about depth last week.
Yeah, I think that reaffirms it, doesn't it? It was rock solid from the start. We had the bizarre sound of Wayne Barnes on mic saying to Keane Healy, "Good scrum, Keane." Never heard a referee say that to a prop before, but it was rock solid to begin with, and Keane had a good match, and that was like, they've definitely got feedback from World Rugby and Matthew now that several of those squeal penalties, maybe all three of them, should not have been given to England. So you saw what happened to the English scrum in Paris. That didn't happen to the Irish scrum. I think it was an aberration to some degree what happened in Twickenham. And I'm not saying some of the penalties in the second half they did seem to get a shunt on, but yeah, there is an international coach can't go out and sign props. You know what I mean? That's I don't know what the solution here is to improve the depth chart, but I would have thought must be worth having a look again at Marty Moore. Like, whenever he starts for Ulster, they're just a better team. They've got a better scrum, and he's played 10 times for Ireland in 2014 and 15, and he was never present in 2 Six Nations campaigns, albeit all 10 appearances off the bench. And we won back-to-back titles. So Ireland did. So I don't know. It's an issue because a head coach can't go out and sign props, unfortunately.
No, for sure. And Gerry, just a word on Scotland. Their under-20s lost very badly at Musgrave Park, and that's Scotland at that level, 0 wins in 10. And then the senior side once again flatter to deceive. And I suppose what's indicative of a questionable culture is that 6 players, lots of them senior players, go out against orders on Saturday or Sunday after the game in Rome, and it seems the word is there's a phone call or a text from Gregor Townsend saying get back. We don't know if everybody came back or what happened. Certainly Finn Russell was dropped, and again it's damning in a sense that we couldn't say for sure if Finn Russell has been dropped for disciplinary or performative reasons, because his performances haven't been good, and they pitch up and do their thing in Dublin. So there's something just off in Scottish rugby, and there was optimism there I think a couple of years ago, which is very much dissipated now.
Maybe too much optimism and not enough humility. If you look at Scottish records since 2000, since the advent of Six Nations, they've won 1 Pro 12 title. And yet they seem to think they should be beating Ireland every time they step on the pitch, as if almost by some kind of divine right. And look at all the trophies that Irish rugby has won in that time, be it Pro 12, Heineken Cups, Challenge Cup, Six Nations titles. I just think they could be a bit more humble at times and a bit more realistic about themselves. I think they get a bit carried away when they win a big game like they beat England in the opening match. It's hard to believe where they went from there. They weren't brilliant against England, and that was one of England's poorer performances of the tournament. Maro Itoje hadn't hit the ground running at all, and so forth. And all the talk of Marcus Smith being taken off, that probably wasn't the reason why England lost that game and Scotland won it. But to get back to your point about the Scots, it's like Finn Russell's 31, and I think Stuart Hogg is 28 or 29. They're not going to be around forevermore, and they are the 2 finest Scottish backs I've seen in the professional era. Finn Russell, when he's on his game, is a joy to watch. You saw what he did in that Lions' third test when he came off the bench. I've never seen one player transform a match. And even when he came on against Ireland, he was such a bastard, Blair Kinghorn. One time he took the ball to the line, disguised to pass out the back, and just slipped a short ball to Mark Bennett. Even a brilliant defender like Gary Ringrose was completely exposed as Bennett went through the gap. If he'd been on his game and he'd been starting and didn't have these issues, they would have been far more dangerous. There's no doubt about it. Does it surprise you that the worst disciplinary record in the tournament, the conceded 61 penalties in their 5 games? I can see the penalties their winners gave for charging into their opposite numbers for high kicks before the ball comes down. Like, they're just so avoidable. They need to. I think they need to have a little bit of a look at themselves. Really.
So France did their thing against England and did it brilliantly, and they are just such a force over in the build-up to the World Cup and then beyond. This could be their decade with this team. If we had an iconic moment, though, from the weekend, and the moment which will linger for years and maybe decades to come, it probably is Paolo Garbisi kicking the penalty and collapsing in a heap, completely overcome, Fiona, with emotion and, the pylon. And, moments earlier, Ange Capuozzo just goes on the most extraordinary run, all 70 kilos of him, and it's just so thrilling. And then has the presence of mind to set up Padovani inside him, and who can believe it after 36 matches? And despite what people had said, no great signs, I think, of massively improving in any great way across this tournament. To win away from home in Cardiff, utterly unbelievable.
Yeah, it was just whoever done that Ness and Dorma music to the actual try is genius, because it was just I watched it over and over again to see such Italian joy when they finished and when he got that ball over to win by 1 point. I suppose there's been a lot of pressure on them, Joe. There's been a lot of talk about South Africa and in the midst of this Six Nations coming in and them maybe not being kicked out of the tournament. So like they've been constantly, I think Crowley has been building something with them. I've seen him at times in games. You know, I'm a big fan of Garbisi. I think he offers a lot. He's a Big Ten, but he's extremely skillful. So I've seen patches, and I think they've started most games really, really well. It was almost like they faded. But in watching this Welsh game, I just felt like they were hanging on in there, and they were the longer they held on in that match, you know, you could see their confidence start building. They were trying things. Normally they're throwing passes away. I think they tightened up a little bit more than we're used to from an Italian team. So it was just brilliant to watch and to see that. And Josh Adams give Capuzzo, he's man of the match medal after the game. It just shows what rugby's about. You know, he was crying, and it was probably one of the biggest moments in the tournament, even though obviously we have France with a Grand Slam, but it's definitely the videos I was watching. I love seeing that kind of stuff, and they've been under so much pressure, and a lot is talked about them as a team, and to just come out and beat Wales in Cardiff is massive.
Yeah, it was a magical few moments. And Capozzo, it turns out Gerry's going to Toulouse and is very highly rated, currently playing at Grenoble in the Pro D2. But last weekend when he came off the bench, and I hadn't seen him, I think a lot of people hadn't seen him before then, it was even interesting in studio and version, the lads were saying, well, he's 70 kgs, he looks about 15, this is almost like a player welfare issue, he shouldn't be out there. And then, like, this is where Italian rugby is. This is a sad moment. Like, the poor kid, is he going to be okay? And then he scores 2 tries, and you think, okay, well, he's going to be just fine. But then, that is an iconic run in Cardiff. That is a run when you're making montages in years to come, TV producers, of Six Nations moments. That will be there for a very, very long time.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. It was the moment of the tournament. It was definitely the try of the tournament, given the circumstances. And also just the brilliant run that Capozzo made to, like, he basically set, when he got the ball, he was about 65 metres from the Welsh try line, and he had 15 Welsh players in front of him. Now, Sam Warburton highlighted the very poor kick chase by Wales in the last minute that left Toby Faletau a little bit exposed on the edge. But for him to change his feet, leave 4 players for dead, and then go around Faletau, break Adams' tackle, and the way he just stood up and did Kieran Harvey like a kipper, and then to have the presence of mind to make the pass inside to Padovani. Yeah, he looks like he should be playing in Serie A, not in Six Nations. Yeah. But what a superstar he could be. 22 years of age. Apparently he's been tearing it up in Grenoble. And now he's going off to Toulouse. And as Jonathan Davies said in commentary, Toulouse don't buy duds. And this kid looks like he could be very special. And it's great for Italian rugby, because I'm talking to a couple of my Italian colleagues during the tournament, you know, when there was all this talk of let's scrap Italy and maybe get South Africa in. You know my feelings on that one, Joe. But we should abandon our fellow Europeans here, and we should keep them in the tournament. And you couldn't but share their joy, you know. There'd been huge cheers all over, everywhere bar Welsh fans. I'd say just really thoroughly loved that moment. And he is a superstar. He's got blinding footwork, absolutely really quick. And it's just great that they had somebody else as well as Garbisi as a foil. And remember too that their under-20s have won 3 out of 5 matches. They've just had their best under-20 tournament ever. So hopefully this is a sign of them being on an upward graph, because we all want them to be competitive.
Yes, absolutely. England, meanwhile, lost obviously in Paris, finished 3rd. Eddie Jones has been given full backing by the RFU over the last 24 hours that he'll be very much taking them to the World Cup. So 2 wins. England 3rd after their 5th place finish last year. And before you write them off totally, they were 5th in 2018 and did okay in 19. So that thought is there, but it's been very average showing from England once again this season. So a final word on this year's championship from each of you then. Fiona, sum things up, obviously from an Irish point of view, very promising. The tournament as a whole?
Tournament as a whole, I really enjoyed it. I thought there was a lot of competitive games, and we polished off by Italia, Wales at the end. So I think what this tournament really saw was all these teams are building towards a World Cup.
Yeah, well, I was about to say just 2 teams reasonably happy given France and Ireland, Gerry, but I think we can throw in the Italians now after the weekend. So 3 teams reasonably happy, and then the others with some soul searching to do.
Big time. I mean, I know England have a few injuries, particularly in their backline, but it was a good tournament for Owen Farrell and others to miss in hindsight, wasn't it? They would have blame as well, I suppose. I think Eddie Jones has lost his way, frankly. I think that he's pulling the wool over people's eyes with this New England. I didn't see any signs of it at all. They've got 4 tries in their 4 games outside of Rome. I think it's good news for everybody else that he does stay in charge of the next World Cup. His talk of the World Cup is tiresome. Wales and Scotland, this sums up the Six Nations. A week ago, Wales came within 1 drop pass by Jonathan Davies of potentially beating the ultimate Grand Slam champions, and a week later lost at home to Italy. That is the Six Nations, and I think it was a really good tournament in that respect, and a great finale. It's a tournament worth winning in its own right. Like France, yes, they're deserving Grand Slam champions. They have a great side, and they wanted that trophy as kind of valediction for their tilt at a World Cup and home soil. But they treated it very much as a tournament in itself. They didn't treat it as a dry run for the World Cup. They used the least amount of players. They made the fewest changes. And the team that started against England was all bar one, the exact same team that beat the All Blacks last November. The only change being that Julian Marchand was injured then, probably the best hooker in Europe, and he's back now. And they've got a great generation of players, but they wanted to win that tournament in its own right. And you see, when you have 80,000 people singing the Marseillaise without any musical accompaniment before the kick-off and several renditions of it during the game, you see the celebrations at the end for winning the Grand Slam and winning the Six Nations title, and how much it meant to Ireland to win the Triple Crown and finish off the way they did, and how much it meant to Italy. Just shows you how much this matters. But yeah, Wales and Scotland, you look at their results, Wales have gone back since last year. Scotland, and then you look at their under-20 results in the form of the Welsh regions in Europe. Jeepers, Irish rugby is doing a lot very well when you look at our under-20s. But it could have been 3 Grand Slams in the last 4 campaigns, but for the pandemic, a lot of people are doing a lot of very good things very well in this country in Irish rugby, no doubt about it.
Yeah, they sure are. I don't know, did you catch the under-20s yesterday, Fiona? But they were at Musgrave Park, capacity crowd, sold out, Richie Murphy in as coach, and they absolutely destroyed Scotland. I mean, it was a complete party atmosphere for the second half, really, everybody off the bench. And as Gerry says, I'm sure there are issues in Irish rugby, but there's an awful lot going right.
Oh, there's so much going right. I love Musgrave Park. I would always attend those 20s games, but I was up at the Energia Cups up in Dublin, so I missed them, but I rewatched the game. And I mean, the standard of rugby that Richie Murphy's playing, and you can see the kicking these guys are doing is just on the money as well. I was blown away throughout the whole tournament even Postlethwaite yesterday. Their centres, their lines are running, everything seemed to be clicking. After that France game, you kind of felt like this was definitely going to be another Grand Slam year, and Ruben Crotter's the captain as well. There's just so much. It's a great conveyor belt, and a lot of it's all provinces. They're coming from Connacht, they're coming from Ulster, Munster and Leinster, so all these academies are definitely doing great work.
Yeah, it's very positive. Anyone catch your eye, Gerry, across the 20s? Did you see much of it?
I did. Obviously, Charlie Tector deserves huge credit for that nerveless touchline conversion win in France. It was a huge moment. You see Axel King's second finish the week before? Jeepers, what a try, what a finish. Yeah. Like TJ Perenara in the World Cup, brilliant try. Loads of good players. It's really encouraging, lots of forwards. Again, a bit like the senior team. They mightn't be as big as some of the English or the French forwards or whatever else, but again, like the senior team, they're all good carriers. They've all got good footwork. They've all got skills. Not a huge amount was expected of this team. They've gone and won a Grand Slam. It's and like I said, but for the pandemic, it could have been 3 Grand Slams in 4 years. Wow, it's incredible. It's great to see. And
it is
coming through.
Yeah, it is interesting because they lost a warm-up game in December to Italy, and there was a great quote from Richie Murphy in the build to the game where he said, in one of our early training sessions, we'd about 25 handling errors in 15 minutes, and we walked off, I was pulling my hair out. So they really have turned it around, and they've won in different styles, hung on and snatched a win in France and been very dominant in other games. So congratulations to all involved. It is amazing. Somebody who in fairness had a bit of size, Devin Toner, we should really mention him. 36 in June, he's calling it a day. The stats, Gerry, this guy's career is just off the charts really when you see the numbers written down. 16 years at Leinster, so he's the record appearance holder at 276 and counting. 70 caps for Ireland, 3 Six Nations including a Grand Slam, 4 Heineken Cups, and really I would say there was probably a period in his career where the powers that be weren't so sure. Yeah.
And maybe his longevity is in part due to the fact that he was a late bloomer and, didn't crack the Irish team that early on. But then I think he was the player most used by Joe Schmidt in his time as coach, certainly until the 2019. And how many tries, good passes of Irish rugby over the last decade emanated from Big Dev catching a line out or catching a restart or just claiming the ball high in the air. I remember once an Italian journalist come up to me after Ireland beat Italy in Rome, and he said, I think Devin Toner is your most important player. And we just took it like he's so freakishly tall. It was just, we took it for granted that it has such great aerial skills, and there was more to his game than that as well. So yeah, one of the great careers, Joe, no doubt about it.
Absolutely. Greg McWilliams was before the media this afternoon at Abbottstown. This is ahead of the Women's Six Nations starting on Saturday. Ireland play Wales at the RDS. So a couple of things out of it, nothing overly dramatic. Nicola Friday announced as captain. 9 uncapped players in the squad, of course, so she's the new captain, second row, 26 years of age, 22 caps under her belt. She's been there since 2016 and is obviously thrilled with the honour, and apparently it was announced to the squad via Zoom, but her family were on as well. So, she's really looking forward to that, as you might imagine. I suppose, Fiona, what jumped out is that it seems McWilliams, when he took the job, asked for assurances about having a full deck of players to choose from. He said, I was given those assurances. But he says, I'm being true to myself, and this is a World Cup Sevens year. In effect, I think he said, I got assurances, but then conceded actually he won't have a full deck to choose from across the championship, because there is, certainly for the last game, which is on in Belfast against Scotland, that clashes with the Canadian leg of sevens, of the Sevens series. So if you take the Japan game as an example, the 15 side then were without Bevan Parsons, Stacey Flood, Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe and Eve Higgins for that final game. So it seems like it'll be a bit of a juggling act for McWilliams on the sevens front again. He said today, we've talked as a group about this. We allowed the players to have a say in how selection is carried out. We're all very comfortable with that. We have the sevens team, and we think it's important that as many as possible go to Langford and represent the women for the World Series, because it is a World Cup year. I'm telling you now that we're going to have a World Cup for the 15s, and we need to play ball with the sevens. We need to work together. And he mentioned Aidan McNulty, the sevens coach, and said they're very aligned in how they see things. So it seems like whatever about the last game, he should have a full deck. Otherwise, this is like, the men's couldn't even contemplate a situation like this. But this is where the women's game in Ireland is at the moment. They are trying to serve two masters, I suppose.
Yeah, and as far as I know, I think, and I could be wrong, I think the sevens players are around for 3 of those games and will miss 2 of the games. Okay. So, and he's probably known this, so he's planning this coming into it. No better coach than Greg McWilliams to keep everyone aligned. So his personality would be exceptional in camp to deal with those issues and get players on board and get everyone buying into his system. And he's really, really good at that. And his personality is kind of one that you want to play from. You want to buy into whatever he's telling you. So I would imagine he's gone in, he's explained everything from the start, and I'm sure he has to make those selection calls as well. The big thing for me and I'd love to see is, at 10, are you going to stick with Stacey Flood for maybe 3 games and she's been outstanding, and then you have to throw someone in at 10, one of the hardest positions to play for the last 2 games. So I'm really intrigued to see what they're going to do with these sevens players and how they're going to be integrated into the team.
Yeah, I mean, England and France are ahead of the rest by a considerable distance. Ireland lost to Scotland in Parma, which was obviously a big disappointment. And then, even this Wales game is interesting in that if you take last year at the start of the Six Nations, Ireland beat Wales, I think, 45-0. And in the meantime, there are now 12 fully contracted Welsh players and 12 semi-professional contracted players. So what difference is that going to make? I mean, that's going to be really fascinating to see. What for you, Fiona, is a good Six Nations for Ireland?
For me, a good Six Nations right now would be winning home games. I think they have the ability to do that, to win the three home games. France, England away. I'm not going to be completely negative and say not a hope, but I think if they look at maybe beating Italy, I think they have the capabilities of the squad is there. He's come in. There was a lot of underlying issues going on in the background. That's all kind of seems to be ironed out. You've players now who want to play, who want to be there. They know they've performed probably not to the standard they have in the past. So they will go into this Wales game, and it's going to be absolutely massive for Wales as well. They're heading to a World Cup, so they've got these players. A lot of their players have moved to Bristol Bears and are playing in that Premiership week in, week out. So we will see the standard if it has lifted from maybe the Wales that we saw 2 years ago. Yeah.
Gerry, just from an IRFU point of view, I'd say they have fingers crossed and everything else, just praying that the ship is steadied, because last year was a real nadir and it brought subsequent criticism, and they kind of need things to settle down a touch and performances to follow.
Yeah, big time, don't they? That was an unimaginably bad year for Irish women's rugby, and so much off the pitch and on the pitch. And at least there seems to be much more alignment now. Kevin Potts come in and taking real ownership of this part of the RFU's ambit, and it just looks like if they could get, I agree with Fiona, if they could just get a nice steady campaign, get 3 home wins. I think it's fallen nicely for them that the Scots are first up at home in the RDS, because
Wales.
They won, should never have lost that game. And, maybe it's no harm that, I don't know what Fiona thinks, that I think it's better for the women's tournament that it's a separate window of its own, alone event. And I think it's no harm that the home matches are moved around 3 different venues as well. So they could get 3 home wins, have a nice steady campaign. I think everybody in the IRFU would breathe a huge collective sigh of relief. Yeah,
I suspect they would. Our rugby coverage here and Off the Ball is with thanks to Vodafone, main sponsor of the Irish rugby team. We all belong to the team of us. Gerry Thornley of the Irish Times, thanks so much. Fiona Hayes, great to have you on as well. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe. Pleasure as always.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.